Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Glitter Fox Studios show, where we help musicians to overcome the obstacles and challenges of learning your favorite instrument and develop the confidence to share your unique talents. Let us know if you find anything useful, valuable, or interesting in this video, and please share this video with anybody else who would like to be able to get their children to learn and practice their instruments. I'm your host, Brett Cusack, aka Mega Love from Glitter Fox Studios and The Confident Musician, and I'm a musician, songwriter, music educator, and life and business coach, here to help you with all of your music-related challenges. We are here to support the entire musician. Without further ado, let's jump into my 5 pro tips on how to get children to learn and practice, to go from motivating them and trying to squish them into shape to helping them find inspiration for learning and practicing music on their own. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Oh yeah. Alrighty, so when I first started teaching, I remember going in and teaching a group of 5 students, or groups of 5 students on electric guitar, and it's pretty crazy when I first started some of my professional teaching career. And I remember teaching them one week, and then I remember asking the next week, like, how did your practice go? And they're looking at me with this blank stare. They had no idea of this concept of practice. And when I started learning, I loved it. And it was really important to me. So I just did it over and over and over again. And so I was very fascinated by this process. And I was like, hey, what's going on here? And that kind of started to lead me down this road of trying to understand what makes someone excel at music and what makes somebody not really want to do it. And so I remember coming out of my music degree and diploma of education and kind of going, all right, now you got to practice. And the kids are like, why? And I was like, I don't know, because you're in a music lesson and that's what we're here to do. So that didn't resonate with me. I was definitely the kid in maths class where the teacher's going, all right, we're going to do exercise 6, blah, blah, blah. And I'm putting up my hand like, why do I have to learn this? And the teacher would say, because I say so. And I was like, that doesn't make sense to me. That does not fly with me as a teacher. So I really wanted to learn. So that's what led me down the path into human behavior and really starting to help people understand who they are and then help them transition or connect what is happening for them, what's most important to them and their goals, or change the goals to match what's important to them. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. We're going to talk a little bit about the underlying psychology and strategies of people who are successful and people who are not. All right, without further ado, let's jump into my 5 pro tips. So tip number 1, if you're trying to inspire your kid to learn and practice the guitar, we need to actually know what's most important to them. So what we want to do here is I want you to write down 3 to 5 to 6 to 7 activities that they can do for hours and hours. They're self-starting, and you don't have to remind them to do it. So this is actually what's most important to them. And I'm sure if you wrote down your own list of 3 to 5 things, they would probably be very different from your kids. And I know from teaching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of music lessons, most of my students that we might be talking about here are probably from 8 to 12 years of age, and they are into video games, hanging out with their buddies, maybe playing some sort of sport. They're into maybe reading and Lego and a bunch of these things. And music is not on the list. And this is not a problem, but it is important to figure out what is actually most important to them. Because people want to be seen and heard for what's most important to them. And they don't want to be other people trying to squish them into shape to make them into something that they're not. And I remember that, some of my teachers were trying to do that to me, and that wasn't necessarily the best strategy. So we're going to get into that a little bit more as we go. So tip number 1 is what are 3 to 5 things of activities that they are self-starting in, can do for hours and hours and hours. No one has to remind them to do it. So these activities are actually what's most important to our students. And what we want to do here is just acknowledge that this person's priorities are actually important to them. And we can't just try and squeeze them into shape. And when we do acknowledge them, that's when other people feel seen and heard, which is a super important part of this process. Tip number 2 is to just determine whether in reality in a conversation or just trying to figure out at what point in their day do they actually then start to prioritize music. And for some kids, it's actually at 2 or 3, which isn't bad. For some kids, it's at level 47, and they're probably most likely not going to be musicians. It's highly likely they're not going to be musicians. Tip number 2 is just to figure out where it is roughly. This is not good or bad, but it is wise to acknowledge how important or not music is to our child in consideration. This person in consideration. So trying to impose something onto somebody rarely, if ever, will lead to long-term success, fulfillment, and happiness. So this is really important for me because when my mum said you need to practice, it was already on high on my priority list, and I was like, sweet. But if she tried to get me to do my history homework, it was never ending. It would just never work. If she tried to get me to clean my room, it would never work until I started teaching guitar lessons in my room. Then my room was spotless because a cleaning room equaled happy students, which meant I got to get to teach more and share my love of music. Very, very different. So tip 3 here is we want to ask for permission to help them connect music to their highest values or priorities. So ask, are you open to me helping you find a way that learning and practicing music might be able to help you with video games, might be able to help you with sports, might be able to help you with reading or Lego. And they might look at you with a blank look and be like this. But what you want to do here is just ask that question and see what their response is. And if they're open to it, they might say yes. And if they say no, maybe we're not really ready for this yet. But I just want to ask the question and ask for permission first. Tip 4 is to connect and to continue to connect learning and practicing music to their priorities. So then we want to ask, how does learning music help you with your video games? How does learning and practicing music help you with your sports? How does learning and practicing music help you with Lego? And most likely you will get some blank stares at first, but stick with it. This is not a fun or easy process necessarily, but it works if you really want to help them get inspired, because this is now starting to help them come from inside them. This is actually helping me do more of what it is that I like to do, which is whatever that might be. You do and will need to get creative with this process, but always remember that whatever the answer is, it has to connect with their values and not because you think it makes sense to you. So I try to do this a lot of the time, and then I would ask the student, does that make sense to you? And they'd be like, and that's usually a no. So what we want to do, we're just trying to figure out if there is a way that it connects. And at the end of the day, if a person feels appreciated for what it is that you're trying to do for them, they're probably more likely to open up to that as an idea of like, actually, this might be actually okay. This is what we would call the teaching process. Sure, it's not going to be fun and easy at times, but keep at it. At the end of the day, if you just acknowledge what another human being's priorities are, they're going to feel appreciated and open to the idea that maybe this is a possibility. I have seen so many students get the idea that music is kind of cool and fun, and then on the way out the door, they're like, you have to practice, you got to do this, and the kid immediately shuts down, and then they come to a few more lessons where the parents are trying to force their kids to practice, and it just never happens. So if you're watching this as an adult too, this might also be good for you to figure out what's most important for you. Alrighty, tip number 5 is to get a teacher or mentor or coach that can help you facilitate this process. It's not easy or fun, but that's cool. And at the end of the day, most students are not going to be professional musicians, but we do want to help them develop a love and a joy of the experience of learning a music, so that they then also hopefully might be open to the idea of when there are other things further down their life that they might need help with, they might be open to the idea of you actually helping and supporting them with this process. If you are curious about some of the things that I'm talking about here about human behavior, I do have a couple of online courses and presentations that are coming up. So you can have a look at the link tree in the description for this video and just check out and see what might be happening to learn some new skills. Alrighty, just to recap, tip number 1 is to know this child's most important priorities and their highest values. Their identity is wrapped up in these things, and if we can at least identify what is most important to them, then we can figure out, all right, cool, this is how likely it is that they're going to be successful with music. Tip 2 is to determine where music is on that priority list. The lower it is, the less likely they're going to be self-starting and focused on their learning and practice. It's not good or bad, it's just what it actually is. Tip number 3 is to ask for permission to connect music to their highest values by asking, are you open to me helping you find a way that learning and practicing music might be able to help you with sports, social time, family time, Lego, video games. and just wait for their response. Tip number 4 is to connect and continue to connect learning and practicing music to their priorities by asking, how does learning music actually help you? And most likely you will get some blank stares, which is cool and completely normal, but see if you can be creative with the process and see if you can actually start to help them find ways that make sense to them, that learning music will actually help them with what is most important to them. And the beauty of this is that they just feel understood and appreciated for what is actually most important to them, so you can actually communicate what you need in terms of what they would also love. And this is what we call a win-win scenario, which is absolutely magical when we start talking in relation to this. And tip number 5 is to get a teacher, mentor, or coach that can help facilitate this process. And I do have space for coaching clients to be able to help you with understanding how to do this or deal with any of your own challenges that might be occurring as you've started to watch this video. And I do have time to speak with you about how that might work. You can grab a link to the 15-minute Q&A with me, and you can talk to me about what it is that you would love to be able to achieve and see whether I'm going to be the right fit to work with. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you found something useful, valuable, or interesting, please let us know in the comments. And if you know somebody else who's having trouble getting their children to learn and practice music, please flick this across to them in a DM or tag them in this video. Thanks so much. I'll see you on the next one. Catch you later. Bye.